Welcome to a Parallel Project Training APM Project Management Qualification podcast based on the APM Body of Knowledge 6th edition. You should be using this in conjunction with our e-learning, study guide and potentially a tutor-led course. For more information, please visit www.parallelprojecttraining.com.
Hello, welcome to this Parallel Project Training podcast with John Bolton and Paul Neighbour. Hello, John.
Hello.
So we're now to the part of the book where you really need a picture.
What?
We really need a picture.
It's tricky, that.
On my podcast.
Can you see? I'm just drawing it here, look, on the front of me. I've just got these pictures in front of me.
Because we're going to talk about scheduling.
Yeah, so you see where I've just drawn this WBS.
So we're going to briefly take you through the...
Shall we fess up?
Yes.
You need to buy the book.
You do. For this one, you've got so far. It's about time you put your hand in your pocket.
And if you think this is hard, wait till earn value. Yes.
Right. So we're going to go through scheduling. So that's going to take us from the work breakdown structure through to a resource-loaded cost curve.
Correct.
For the project.
Cumulative cost curve, yeah.
Cumulative cost curve. So
that's it then, isn't it?
So the reduced planning company.
Reduced planning company. Oh, the reduced Shakespeare company.
Reduced Shakespeare. So
Henry V in a minute.
So first step is we talked about the work breakdown structure. Break the project into a number of work packages.
That's right. So we've already done that.
Each of those work packages may contain a number of activities.
Do you know what we didn't do when we did work packages? We forgot to talk about what actually a work package looks like. I remember now. A work package is just a discrete bit of work, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So a work breakdown structure is a structured way of breaking work down.
Down the work.
And then you end up with work packages. And these work packages...
Defined scope, budget.
Yeah, that's right. They're kind of little mini projects if you want them to be.
Yes.
Yeah, so
that's right.
And they've got a product, so they've got something you're producing.
Yes, that's right.
But once you've got one of those...
that work package may be broken into more detailed activities.
Yep.
So, I don't know.
Well, you may choose to give them a detailed statement of work, mightn't you? So
yes.
Working like a method statement or something, if you need to, but you don't always need to.
Yes.
If you're on a building job, you don't tell a bricklayer how to lay bricks.
No. But
if you're moving a big RSJ in with a crane, you might have a work package for that, which needs more detail, more planning.
That's right.
So, it's just...
So the work package might be go live with a new IT system, but you might find that you need to put a number of more activities in there because it might be only a 12-hour window.
Yeah.
But you just need a little bit more detail to convince yourself you can do it within the 12-hour window.
Yeah, that's
so it doesn't mean you need every bar. Not every bar on the bar chart is a work package.
Well, I think the way we've portrayed it in the book is...
Yes, because we've done it. We've simplified it.
We've simplified it to work packages. So can we let's pretend... Right, because otherwise it doesn't fit.
One-to-one correspondence between work packages and...
There's a one-to-one relationship between work package and line on Gantt chart.
Line on Gantt in the book.
For the purposes of the book.
Yes.
Okay. That doesn't mean it's wrong.
No.
But it could easily be right.
Yeah.
So it does depend on the level of detail you have in your project, really.
So, having identified all the activities within the work package, the next thing is to work out the dependencies. So
That's right.
When we've finished this activity, we can then proceed to the next one. Yeah. And when that one's finished, we can proceed to the next one. And at the same time, we may have some things in parallel with that. Yeah. So,
because it's quite important to remember that just because something's on the left-hand side of the work breakdown structure doesn't mean it comes first. Necessarily.
Yes.
It may do. And the tendency of most people is to do that.
Yes, but there is no sequence or order implied.
No, and similarly, the one on the right-hand side is not necessarily the last thing.
Yes.
It might work out like that, but it's no intention that it is. And that's quite an important principle, really, because if you're going to add stuff in, people go slowly, inexorably mad trying to update all the numbers.
Okay.
And because they try and slot things in the right place, which is bizarre.
Yes.
And they think, well, hang on, so they get sort of right confused. And the intention of the work breakdown structure is to work out what all the work is.
Yes.
Forget about the order they come in.
Yes.
And it's really important to do
take this one step at a time.
That's right. And then you do the precedence diagram, which puts them in order.
Yes. Works out the interfaces between the different...
That's right. So you've got two separate things, both trying to achieve different things.
Yes.
I mean, your schedule is your key to your plan, isn't it?
Yes. So these dependencies can be different types of dependencies. We can have a finish. When this finishes, this next one will start. Or we can have a start or finish type dependency.
Yes. Okay. But you won't need to worry about those in the exam.
No, because all dependencies are simple finish start dependencies.
So what that means is when one finishes, the other one can start.
Yes.
So the one to the right of it, and that's what the line between them means.
Yes.
It doesn't mean it has to start straight away.
No.
Because it can have a gap.
Yes.
And you can have a gap anywhere, really.
Which is lag.
Yes. Float.
Or float.
Or float.
It can be lag or float, the gap.
Oh, the two things are different though, aren't they?
Yes.
Lag is a time that you've inserted.
Yes.
Float is a time that's calculated.
Because it's not on the critical path.
Well, the principle is that not all the tasks take the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So if you've got two tasks running side by side, then one might take longer than the other. But it doesn't mean you don't stop the shorter one. You don't keep doing the shorter one to coincide with the end of the longer one. When the short one finishes, it finishes. And
Yes.
nothing happens except the long one still carrying on.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
only when both of them are finished can you start the next one.
Yes.
And that's what finish
right.
start means.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I think there's loads of other connectivity like start and finish and finish start even.
Mm-hmm.
I lose the will to live with finish start. I've never ever found a.
No.
So I'm not even going to talk about it anymore.
No.
In fact, I wish I hadn't mentioned it. So,
Right. So
So
now
anyway.
we have the precedence diagram.
so the precedence diagram is different from the work breakdown structure.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the flow chart through the project from the left to the right, showing
Oh, it's not a flow chart.
why not.
Well, no, it's not. It's not a probability, is it? It's not. Yes, no. Flow charts have branches.
Okay, yes, it doesn't have
There's
branches.
all of these things are going to happen.
Yes,
it's
that's
not
right.
either or.
It's
is
a
it?
sequence then, from the left
Correct. Yes.
to the right,
That's right.
showing
That's
the
right.
flow through
it's
the
like
project.
it's like a daisy chain of stuff.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So we start on the left-hand side and we work all the way to the right. And when we've done all the boxes, we've finished all the work. And then from there, we can then work out what the critical path is.
That's right.
So we can do the critical path is the longest path through that precedence diagram.
Yeah, people get confused by that by saying the longest, don't they?
Because
Well, because it's kind of also the shortest.
the shortest the project can be, shortest time the
The
project
shortest
can
the
be
time
completed
the
in.
project can be completed in,
Yes.
which also happens to be the longest duration of the project.
That's right.
So it's where the short and the long coincide.
Yes.
But it's also the path with least float.
It is the path with the least float. But we haven't talked about float.
No, all right.
So so the longest path is the critical path.
Well, you can't talk about the critical path until you talk about float.
Yes, we can. We can say it's the longest path through the network. How do we find the critical path?
Because by calculating the float.
Correct. So what we have to do is we have to look at the network and look for the longest path. And the way you do that is by doing a forward pass,
Yes.
where you add all the durations together, and
Yeah.
a backwards pass, where you take all the durations
Away.
away. And really, you do need to look at the book to understand
You do.
how to
You
do
do,
that.
because it's quite. People do get a bit confused.
Well,
It's like I always describe these as dolphins.
Uh-huh.
Some of these subjects are dolphins. Have you ever seen those pictures of the magic eye pictures with all the dots on? Yeah, you must have done. When you hold them up to your face and you slowly pull them away, and
Oh, yes.
like a three-dimensional picture
Yes.
appears. And some people stare at them for years and never get it.
Yes, and
So
some
some of
people
these are
straight
like
away.
that.
Yes, some
And this
people
is a
just do it.
dolphin.
Yes.
Sometimes people
Just get it like that.
Yeah,
and other
yeah,
people just never going to get it.
yeah, that's right. So in a way, you got to kind of look in the book really, and see what we're talking about.
So we got to doing the forward pass to work out the total duration.
Backward pass.
pass, working backwards to work out how much spare time we have. And from there, we can work out that there's no float on the
On a particular limb,
on a particular, or minimum float on a particular limb.
least float.
Least float.
Not
is the correct
minimum.
word. Least float.
Yep, least float.
So that comes out. And the APM, you do need to look, because the APM have a particular way of calculating that. Some rules starting at 0 and adding the duration and carrying that forward, which is different from the way some of the software packages do it. So you just need to...
It's different from the way a lot of big companies do it as well,
Yes.
which I discovered a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Got into a proper argument. Anyway,
Yes.
there's the APM, yeah. And then once you've got the precedence diagram, a lot of people manage projects with the precedence diagram.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, we used to...
It's easier.
Yeah, it popped out the model that we used to use a precedence diagram.
Yes.
And but a lot of people use a thing called a Gantt chart.
That's right. So there we just turn the precedence diagram sideways, really. So we take the activities off the precedence diagram and we take the start dates, usually the planned start dates, the early dates, and we use those to draw to tell us when the activities are going to start and when they're going to finish.
That's right. So the various nodes become lines on the Gantt chart.
They do. They do.
Do you know why it's called a Gantt chart?
Because it was invented by a guy called Henry Gantt.
Henri Gantt. American.
So you'll see the float. So when you take the start dates and end dates off the precedence diagram and plot them on the Gantt chart, the float will emerge as a little gap in the logic.
It will.
And I think it's nice to show the links as well, but also show the float.
Yeah, it just gets a bit messy if you do that.
Yeah, but I think there were marks for showing the float and the links.
No, there's marks for the float. There's not marks for the links.
Okay.
I don't think there's marks for the links.
Okay. So
I don't think something's going to hurt if you show them,
No.
but I think it does get a bit messy. So, regardless of whether there's marks, if you whatever you put on these Gantt and these charts, as long as you have a key,
Yes.
make sure the examiner's clear what you've done.
Yes.
We haven't seen the marking schemes for these questions, or any questions particularly. We've seen a few, but not officially, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't go around telling you what exactly the marking scheme was, even if we knew it, because that would be a bit. But needless to say, I think the examiners are looking for a nice, clearly explained
Clearly
chart.
labelled, yes.
And the usual rules apply, really. Don't draw something unless you're clear what it is, with a key or an index or something.
So a typical question might be to take a precedence diagram, draw a Gantt chart from it.
Yeah, that's right.
Or do a precedence analysis, a critical forward pass, backwards pass. And from
It's called
there,
a critical path analysis, isn't it? Not precedence analysis.
Sorry, critical path analysis.
Yeah.
And from there, we can then do. We can go and think about the resources that we need. So we can what they call resource load, the Gantt
that's
chart.
right. The ones in the book have got the resources in the column separate,
Yes.
but quite often in the questions. Well, that sometimes happens, but sometimes also in the questions, apparently, the resources are on the bars
on
themselves.
the bar themselves.
Yeah, so
That's the way I always teach you, actually, to write the resources on the bars, then add them up as a column.
yeah, that's probably a better way of doing it.
Because there's
Isn't
a less chance of making a mistake.
Shall I change that?
No, because I think it'll look messy. I think
I think that's probably why I didn't do it in the first place.
Yes, no, I think it's quite clear like this.
Yeah,
But,
anyway, each of the bar, and the example in the book and some examples have got two types of resource.
Yes.
But I don't think in the questions they go down to that. They usually just have one type of resource. Yes. So in a way, the examples are a bit more complicated than they need to be. But that was just to cover off the bases in case you do come across one.
Well, I think you did that for demonstrating smoothing and levelling, which is the next bit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is that in this part?
So we talked about resource histogram, didn't we?
Yes.
So you've got a resource histogram, which is at the bottom, which is like a bar chart representation of what the Gantt chart means in terms of resources.
That's right.
So the Gantt chart shows you when the tasks are happening. The resources show you what resources are allocated to each of those tasks.
And when you mean a bar chart, you mean a bar chart like you get out of Excel, like a stacked
yeah,
bar
that's
chart.
right. Yeah, like you see on News at 10 when they're talking about who's voting for
that's
who.
Right,
you know?
because some people call the flipping Gantt chart a bar chart.
Yeah. Well, it is a bar chart. It's not
horizontal bars.
Well, that's not a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart had resources down the left and time across the top.
Yes.
Because he was a time and motion study bloke, wasn't he?
Yes.
Anyway, that's sad. Right. Not that he was a time and motion study, but that's
so
how I know
then
it.
we know what the demand is from working out what resources we need for each activity and adding them all up.
That's right. And then you can go to the resource owners and say, oh, I need 7 of these people or 5 of these people.
And they say no chance.
And they go, you're having a laugh. We haven't got any enough. So make do with 1.
So you're up to smoothing and levelling.
Yeah, we'll do that next one because that's not in this bit.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's another bit in here because the 2 assessment criteria for this section are explaining the process for creating and maintaining a schedule.
Uh-huh.
It's quite important. The Gantt chart is a schedule. Okay, it's not a plan.
Yes.
So I don't know if you've listened to any other podcasts, listeners, but you sometimes hear people talking about the Gantt chart as being a plan, the project plan, and strictly speaking, that's not an adequate definition, really. The Gantt chart's a schedule. It's a time phase schedule. And neither is it a program. So you might hear people talk about the program and when things are going to happen. Very common in construction, but unfortunately you'll get confused with program management if you do that. So just think of a Gantt chart as a schedule. And then it says describe different techniques for depicting a schedule. Well, that's a precedence diagram and a Gantt chart.
What about the maintaining a schedule? So what you normally do is part of your project control. When you baseline the PMP, you take a copy of the schedule, and then you update it monthly as a current view.
That's right.
And then you compare that with the original baseline, so you'll get a variance showing
that's right. We didn't talk about baselines particularly in terms of scheduling, but some of the software allows you to have sort of 9,999 baselines, which always struck me as a bit odd. You don't change the baseline very often, do you? Do you, Paul?
I'm smiling. I'm not.
Why are you smiling?
Because okay. Do you want to go in why we have different baselines? Do you want to go?
If you want,
you might have a baseline that you've agreed with your customer contractually, but you then almost you may have an internal baseline that you're working to, which might be more challenging.
I don't want to go with that. I don't want to agree with that.
Yes,
I'm not going to agree with having two plans.
So no, it's not two plans. It's two baselines.
Sounds like it.
Two copies.
Why is it different then?
That's a difficult question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different plan basically. I wouldn't do that personally.
Yes.
But I think you can change the baseline. But the trouble is, if you change the baseline as a consequence of change control, yes, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
Oh yes, of course it is.
But if you keep on changing the baseline, I mean, in a year's project, if you change the baseline 12 times, you've probably got yourself a bit of a problem.
Yes.
Well,
you haven't, because you're on plan all the time.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
If you just have a monthly rebaselining exercise.
Project management is not intended to be, deduce what happened, then change the plan to match it.
Oh, no, that's really good. You know exactly
You'll be very successful.
You know exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
Your plan is always perfect.
Okay. I think I'm not saying you don't change baselines, but I think you need to just be careful at what you use that term for and how often you change it. Because the other thing about it is if you're recording actuals against it,
it's totally demotivating for team if you change the baseline every month, because they're going,
that's right.
Oh, which plan am I working to now?
That's right.
Oh, confused.
But also, if you start bunging in loads of other work packages or splitting work packages up, you end up having to reallocate all the values and everything, and it just gets really confusing.
You're almost best to just stick with a plan.
Yeah, just
as long
as
as you
with
possibly can.
Mm.
Good.
Yeah.
Maintaining a schedule, we talked about that.
And it also talks about advantage and disadvantage of using software scheduling tools.
Can think of lots of advantages. Quicker, easy to change.
Yeah, you can do lots of what ifs. What ifs are good.
Yes.
So if this took that long, and it takes a lot of the grunt out.
Yeah. Disadvantages.
I think the garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. I think because you can put lots of detail in, you do. And you get too much detail in. I'm just flicking through the book. See what we do. Oh, here we go.
I think we can dumb it all down a bit.
Yeah.
So that when you start a project, the first reaction of some people is just dive straight into one of the planning tools
without thinking about
what the scope is, and you just
the success
have
criteria.
let's put a quick plan together.
Yeah.
And okay, I mean, I suppose there's times for that, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it can make it all seem a bit too. It can all become a bit too blasé, and
some of them have got like 4,500 lines on.
Yeah, 12,500 was the largest one I ever saw.
Bloody hell!
And I went to.
Well, I mean, if you've got 12,500 people, but
I went to talk to this particular project manager, and they'd had this plan created by some consultants, and she said, "Oh, I'm having a lot of trouble managing the plan."
Was it £1 a line?
And she said, "It
was a parametric."
And she said, we're going to have a cup of tea while the laptop boots up. I thought, well, it must be an old laptop. But it was so slow because it was back in 15 years ago. And it took so long to load the plan. It took like half an hour to load the plan. Yeah. And so we came back. So, well, how big is it? He said, 12,500 lines. I said, well, how do you manage that? Well, she doesn't, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's, you can do that. And sometimes people see it as authoritative simply because it's come out of a computer. Therefore, it must be. Yes. I mean, I've seen people, from quite sophisticated organisations that have generated a plan, and the critical path starts halfway through. Now, technically, that can't happen. Yes. I've got a copy of it on my laptop.
Yes.
Yeah, and
we could go off piste a little bit if you want.
Go on then.
I've just discovered something, which is, I think it's I'll put it in the post, but it's the DSNE or something. Guidelines for quality planning. 12 criteria for testing a plan. It's brilliant stuff. Things like that. Dangles. Is there a good critical path? Because it's quite difficult. What's a good plan?
Hammocks,
all those sort of things. So it's got these criteria for assessing whether it's a good quality plan.
Because some of the functionality in these software tools is quite astonishing, but you can cut and paste links between one date and another date, and it completely bypasses all of the scheduling because it takes it as an absolute.
Yes,
and it's an absolute figure now, and it's relative to that one.
Yes,
you see all these things going on, and I just get a bit nervous with it, really.
Yes,
but having said that, I use them, and I think they're great, actually. I always tell people these sorts of things, you probably get 90% of what you need out of 10% of what they'll do.
Good.
Questions?
Oh, quite a lot.
Yeah.
Doing critical path analysis, turning critical paths into Gantt charts,
Analysing
analysing
precedence
resources,
diagrams.
resource smoothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think your dolphin analogy is really good because if you're good at these, they're good questions
Yeah,
to do.
yeah.
If you're not good,
Forget it.
forget it. Because
Don't forget it, because it's such a big chunk of the
the
syllabus.
danger is you can make one mistake and lose quite a few marks. And they
yeah.
do. I think the APM have admitted these questions do take more time
than 15 minutes.
than
yeah.
15 minutes. So,
But some take less, so I can understand.
so I would.
logic of it.
I would advise people to do them last.
Nowhere do the APM say each question takes 15 minutes, by the way.
Do they? Oh, they
No, no.
don't. They say the whole exam takes.
Yeah. So, but it's the way we guide people is to give them 15 minutes is a good rule of thumb.
So these questions would take longer than some of the others.
If you know, I mean, people whistle through these in 5 minutes.
Yes.
You know,
depending
so
on
it does
how-
depend. It's like any question. You could spend 25 minutes on a governance question if you really felt like it. I wouldn't advocate that, by the way. But,
Good. I think it works well in the e-learning as well. This, I think, it's quite a good. I quite often recommend people if they dip into the e-learning on this bit. It's quite.
yeah.
It builds up quite nicely. It takes them through it quite well. Good.
Cool.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast and found it informative. To order a study guide, e-learning, or a tutor-led course to go with this podcast, please visit www.parallelprojecttraining.com.